Hello, today we are going to talk about audit risk model. An audit risk model is the methodology that the auditor uses to plan the audit strategy. Before issuing an opinion on financial reports, the auditor needs to reduce the audit risk to an acceptable level to ensure that he can provide a reliable opinion. For this, he needs to look at the components of audit risk. Audit risk is a function of inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. Inherent risk and control risk are assessed by the auditor, whereas detection risk is controlled by the auditor. As per ASA 315, auditor needs to understand the entity and its environment before assessing inherent and control risk. It allows the auditor to identify and assess the risks of the entity and ultimately determine the appropriate audit strategy he must use. The first risk which the auditor needs to assess is inherent risk. It is the risk of material misstatement which may arise due to error or omission as a result of factors other than the failure of internal controls. The inherent risk is higher where a high degree of judgment and estimation is involved, or where the transaction of the entity are highly complex. It is dependent on the nature and size of the business. After careful assessment of inherent risk, the auditor proceeds with control risk assessment. This risk suggests that the internal control within the entity will not be effective in preventing or detecting material misstatements. Firstly, the auditor needs to understand the internal control structure of the entity, and then he should identify the potential misstatements that could occur and respective controls which are in place to deal with those risks. Finally, auditor sets control risk as high, medium, or low based on his assessment of control design effectiveness. If the controls look good, he will perform more controls testing to test the operating effectiveness of those controls. But if the controls look bad, the auditor will focus his strategy towards more detailed testing by performing substantive tests, and he will do less or no controls testing. Both control risk and inherent risk determine the level of detection risk set by the auditor. It is the risk of not detecting material misstatements which in fact exist. Auditor sets the level of detection risk, and therefore he may reduce the component through adequate planning and timing and extent of audit procedures. Now, to provide a better understanding of audit risk model, we will use an example of two companies, Company A and Company B, which have different levels of inherent and control risk. Let's talk about Company A first. Company A has high inherent risk and control risk, which will increase the level of potential misstatement in the financial reports of this company. On the other hand, Company B has low inherent risk and control risk, which decreases the risk of material misstatement in the company's financial reports. Now the question arises, which company will require more audit efforts, that is more detailed testing? The answer is Company A, as auditor needs to do more detailed testing to detect all material misstatements in the financial reports of this company. Whereas in Company B, the auditor may perform less detailed procedures as the inherent risk and control risk are low, and he may opt for more controls testing and may adopt control-based approach instead of substantive testing. This shows that if inherent risk and control risk are assessed as low, then the auditor opts for less detailed testing and sets the detection risk as high. Whereas if the inherent risk and control risk are set as high, then the potential risk of material misstatement is significant, so auditor opts for more detailed testing and sets the detection risk as low.
Created using Powtoon.